This week on Hope City Overtime, we take a look at the idea of unity. We talk about seasons and knowing what God is saying in the season you are, preparing you for the next season. We're kind of all over this place, but I promise you this is one you're going to want to watch. Make sure you like and subscribe. Share it with a friend. Let's get it.
Welcome to Hope City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message. And this week we moved into our last theme of the Romans series, which is a little bittersweet because it's been a really good series and it's crazy that we're coming to the end of it.
Nuts.
So the whole series has been broken down to what it looks like to be God's own holy people. And this week we got to the people part of it and got to talk about unity. So I thought what we would do is just have a disagreement today and show everybody what it looks like to pursue unity in the middle of a disagreement. So I'm going to go ahead and throw out there that I think Pepsi is better than Coke.
Well, I'm a Coke Zero, so you can have that one.
No, it's fine. You can have bad taste. That's legal. Like I'm not hating for you that your taste buds are all messed up. That's fine.
See how easy we handle
Yeah,
that? Boom.
yeah. Look at that.
Listen and learn.
That's it.
Yeah, did.
I actually did use Pepsi and Coke in the message, and people were like, "What?"
Yeah.
I know, but we joke about it. But unity, it was one of the things Paul wrote about the most, not just in Romans, but I think there are 4 different letters where he talks about the church as one body and is really trying to express how important unity is. And my guess would be that it's because it was just as challenging for them then as it is for us now. So just kind of big picture, what are some of the threats, what's some of the biggest threats you see to unity in the church? We'll start at a congregational level and then we'll move into a big C church kind of level.
It's a good question.
Thank you.
I think what threatens unity within the church is our lack of, like, even culturally, it's just not a value that people pursue anymore.
Mm-hmm.
In a place where hyper individuality is really what we've heightened, like almost to like idol standards, right? Like we've placed individuality in this place where it's above all else. And unfortunately, what that creates, even within the constructs of the church, is now I'm fighting that cultural understanding in relationship with those who I do life with in community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and we talked through this in the message, but that fight for unison versus harmony is really, I believe, what's threatening true unity in the church. Mm-hmm. We all have to look, act, walk, talk alike. Well, if that's the case, how many people actually look, walk, talk alike? Like, specifically within the scope of our current cultural climate. Everybody's got a different opinion.
And then you narrow it down. Like, one of the things I've thought about, so the idea was that unison is if everything is exactly the same, whereas harmony is there are differences, but they're still in the same musical chord. There's like agreement there. Like in a big group, you might find like, oh, well, we can find unison. We're all the same. But as soon as you like weed out and get down to that, then you just find something smaller to nitpick over. And then it's like, now these people are not enough like me. So it's kind of a lie. Like you never really get to a point where you see eye to eye with everyone on everything. If you do, that would be so boring and you'd never learn and grow. What about you? What do you think some of the threats to unity in the church?
My first thought was kind of like the opposite. I just thought division when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously if we're not unified, in many senses, we are divided. And I think about all the negative ramification that comes from us being divided.
Mm-hmm.
There are walls that we put up. There are things that I'll no longer turn to this person in help because of our divided stance. And if the enemy can continue to separate us like that, we are now weakened. That's why oftentimes the enemy tries to isolate us. So when I look at the threat of division and so many things, so many factors that attribute to that, it is very threatening. I do think when you see Romans 12, the way Paul starts off about the importance of living like a holy and living a holy sacrifice, I do think that sets the tone for us on the path to reach unity if I'm living my life in a way where it's sacrificial, it's holy, it's set apart. I am in a better position to hear from him and to lay down certain freedoms and rights I have for the sake of the body as a whole. But if I don't even start there to get to the latter part of Romans, I'm not going to see the cost worth it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to run with the 2 or 3 that I can agree with, and that's not work. And that just causes me to miss out on what God really wants to do in the body because I'm choosing to just think smaller and go with the ones that agree with me. So, yeah, I was just thinking division.
Yeah. I can't remember. It was sometime in Romans that I think it was your illustration, John, where you talked about people's perception of like what we think other people are thinking about us. I think some of that comes into play. It wasn't a message about unity, but I think sometimes we're faster to assume that whoever the other is, that they're going to not just disagree with us, but like discount us because of that disagreement. And we almost presume a division before it's actually there. And then
Yeah.
it happens because we've made that assumption without ever actually attempting to enter into that difficult conversation, or it doesn't even have to be a difficult conversation,
Yeah.
just a disagreement and preference about something. So that's kind of been going in the back of my head. I can't remember what the message was.
That was the one on being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah. But I think that can kind of play a role in how we talk to other people and how we disagree with people, just assuming, oh, they're not going to like me because I disagree with this, or they're going to judge me because of this, where a lot of times it's not fun to have disagreement conversations, but
Yeah.
we have them often. I mean, you're quick to say if you're not having tough conversations pretty regularly, you're probably not leading. So just as the nature of being pastors, we can get in some disagreements,
Yeah.
but when you get through them, gosh, there's a solid foundation in that relationship when you're like, oh, we worked through some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even from a practical place, if the only people you hang around with look, act, walk, and talk just like you, there's no growth. There's no ability to grow. You're not experiencing different things. You're not hearing from different perspectives. The danger of an echo chamber is that you only hear one message. It's just one message that keeps coming back to you. And again, I don't know when it happened, but it seems like that seems to be the goal of so many in culture today, is to find the echo chamber that's saying the same thing that I believe and just watch it bounce off the wall, magnify the same message over and over again. And that gets a little confusing.
And we don't even have to always work at it, because if the algorithm figures out
Feeds it to
that's
you.
our echo chamber, you don't even realize you're in it because you're just getting fed all the same stuff, unless you're getting offline. Get offline every now and then and talk to people. But what about at the Big C Church? Because I know a lot of what Paul was writing to was one community, and it's good for us to see this as a congregation and learn from it. But disunity in the church as a whole is a pretty big challenge too. Like, how do we navigate living in that reality where we have real theological differences, but are still supposed to be unified as the body?
Well, that's a good question. I think the hope is that we are able to navigate in a place of unity across some of those divides, just because we don't agree on everything theologically. Now, again, we got to be careful here, because there are some things that are, I would argue, are primary. So that leads to another long conversation that maybe we do a 4 podcast series on. But ultimately, there are some things that are essential. If at any point someone is trying to change anything that navigates or changes the idea of the gospel as it relates to salvation, faith, grace, like those things, if they're trying to change, that's a different conversation. But if what separates us are some theological differences that I would argue are secondary, there are places where we can find ourselves in unity. Not to go too far ahead, but next week when we consider what else Paul says in the book of Romans about unity, one of the things he says is don't tear apart. It's different for me to have a disagreement with you, and then there's also the nuance of tearing you apart. I can disagree without tearing you apart. And so learning how to do that is critical. And learning the humility and self-sacrifice that's necessary to live in relationship with somebody where me and you don't agree on this thing, but we can still live in a place of unity. I don't have to tear down your thing in order to prove my thing. Specifically in a culture that's just obsessed with, no, there's one right way of doing things. Well, it gets challenging too. So I think ultimately it's a challenge to live in that place, but I think it's a mandate of those who call themselves the children of God.
Yeah. And I love even not tearing down. I can just choose to not engage in conversation when someone's like, oh my gosh, can you believe that they worship with these songs at this church over here? Again, not on primary issues, but just being like, hey, that might not be what I would choose, but more power to them if they're bringing the Lord true worship and that's how they want to do it. Like, just not immediately being like, yeah, I can't believe that. That's the worst.
But can you believe some of these songs that we're singing?
Your wife's picking them, bro.
We Big C Church.
Yeah.
I remember unity has always been big on my heart. And I think when I was younger, it was way more like, like this energy wells up to fight for unity. I think being older, I better understand. I won't fully see this until the Lord comes back, but sometimes it is such a daunting subject matter now that because I like to make sure everything is tied up and complete, there's a heavy tension in me knowing I have to live with this tension until the Lord comes back. That's what makes it so, so challenging. It's worth fighting for, but if we continue to do it in our own might, it becomes exhausting and then discouraging, and then you just quit.
Yeah.
But it's remembering that we need the Lord's Spirit every day to choose to die to myself and live as a member of his body and do my part, even if I feel others are not doing their part. I live my life as a living and holy sacrifice to him and him alone. That will grant me the peace I think I need to not lose my mind when I feel like, why aren't we getting it? Because I think there are probably situations where people are saying that about me. Why isn't this joker getting this yet? And it might not even be a subject I'm even thinking about. So there is that constant tension we have to get comfortable with until the Lord comes back.
Yeah. So kind of moving into this message, we talked about the image Paul paints of one body, which is just brilliant. Paul knew exactly what he was doing. That's why the Lord gifted him and had him write so much of Scripture.
Yeah.
But this image of unity as one body with many parts, and Romans 12:4 says, just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. And so I want to talk about that idea of special function, because I think a lot of us get tripped up in figuring out what our place is. Like, we can kind of like that idea of like, yeah, we're all one body, but then when it comes to each part having a special function, we don't know where to start to figure out what that is. Unless, there's some people that they're just so musically gifted that you're just like, that's almost an obvious thing. But for a lot of people, I think they may have heard this message, maybe sitting watching this and thinking, what is my place? How would you advise someone to start that discernment process of figuring out what their part is in the body?
It definitely requires us spending time with the Lord, knowing him and his nature, reminding ourselves that he is a good father and that he does everything accordingly to a perfect plan, a perfect will. That postures us better to kind of wait upon him and have him revealed to us. But I think, again, it's so important that we come to him knowing that he is good, that he knows what's best, and an openness to accept the direction he gives us. Because it is easy for us to want to be a certain part of the body that we think gets the most attention. But there are so many parts that are not really seen, that in Romans it says to clothe them and cover them and give them extra time. Every part plays such a crucial piece to the body, but it is easy for us to elevate other parts. So I would just say, just knowing his nature, that he is good, and that when we do what he's called us to do, I come to life when I finally tap into what he's made me to do.
Yeah.
And the thing that I thought I needed, I don't even think about no more, because I'm so alive, living in one accord the way he's made me by design. It's so freeing at that moment. There's no more pressure with it.
Yeah. I think that's a good, even just kind of asking, where do I feel the most alive? Like, where are my passions is a great place to start. Because I do think sometimes it's like, I just want to figure it out. I know I'm not a preacher, but like, where do I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the scripture speaks a lot about giftings and the gifts that we receive. I think if I'm trying to figure out where I fit, I think the first question I would probably try to figure out is, how have I been wired? What are those giftings in me? You know, the Ephesians 4 conversation. Even in Corinthians, he starts talking a little bit about some of these gifts and the way that they affect the body. So I've always loved that picture. You know, again, I can argue that we are found within the context of Scripture, that every page, it screams about who he is. And because we're created in his image, we can find ourselves there. So yeah, like studying the word, figuring out what it looks like. I think sometimes, if we're not careful, we broaden the search of where we fit within a Sunday morning structure. So I'm a part of the body of Christ when I volunteer in the tech team or volunteer in the children's ministry. And I'm not doing my special function unless it fits a Sunday morning mode of operation. And I would just argue that that's a short-sighted perspective. I completely think we all need to serve. I'm a big proponent of people volunteering and playing a role in their local church. Otherwise, the local church doesn't exist without volunteers. Like, we need that. But in the same breath, there are special functions that the Lord has given. As a matter of fact, in the breakdown of some of these incredible gifts, one of the conversations is around this idea of generosity. Like, so what does generosity look like in the body of Christ? Showing kindness. We don't have a kindness director here on Sunday, although we might want to put one in place. But there are people who can show kindness in a grocery store, show kindness to their friends. Like, that's the place you fit. I mean, if we stop being, if the person who's kind stops being kind because there's not a platform for that, I think we're falling short of all that God intended. And as much as I totally believe the gifts need to be present in the constructs of the church, I don't think that the only place they're present is within the constructs of the church. So sometimes that broadening could help you maybe find out where you fit.
Yeah. I think all of that is really, really helpful. You kind of alluded to this already, but in that 1 Corinthians passage, so he brought up 1 Corinthians 12. Just putting together that it was Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12. That's very easy to remember. He talks, I almost think that Paul's being a little bit like silly in this to convey a point, because he says we have many parts, not just one part. If the foot says I'm not a part of the body because I'm not a hand, that doesn't make it less a part of the body. And if the ear says I'm not a part of the body because I'm not an eye, would that make it any less a part of a body? In my mind, that's just Paul being like, do you hear how ridiculous this is when we talk about it in this way? And yet I do think that we all really struggle with this idea of comparison and seeing what someone else is doing and thinking, well, if I'm not doing that, like, I don't have the same value, or I don't, there's just some comparison that seeps in there. And so I just wondered if either of you would be willing to share if that's ever been a struggle for you in a season where you kind of thought that your role or your gift would look more like not even just someone else, it could be someone else, but a different position, and just kind of wrestled through figuring out, oh no, I'm not a foot that wants to be a hand. I'm a foot that wants to be a foot.
I mean, I think growing up when I was younger, the moment I knew I wanted to do ministry, I would look to the noticeable ministry positions and want for that. I think as I got a little older, I quickly realized there's way less pressure when I just discover who he's made me to be versus me trying to constantly fail at reaching that mark of where that person was that I wanted to kind of be like. But I was fortunate where I think, like, that's one of the things my father always shared with me was he always kind of chipped away at this idea of climbing this hierarchy of ministry and always simplified it where it was all about just being with him. It always came back to just being with the Father. And when you keep hearing that message so often, for me at least, it helped me to keep the main focus, which is to be with him. And out of being with him, all these other things flow. So I was fortunate to always have that voice in my head. So I did not, and I still don't to this day, I don't feel like what I do gives me value. I feel like it's my contribution to the kingdom, but it does not define and make me who I am. But there were seasons when I wasn't in ministry more full time where I missed it, and I felt like I'm not doing enough because I should be there. I should be in the game. I'm not. So therefore, I'm just wasting everyone's time, and I'm wasting my time. And that was a tough season for me to be in. But I think it was a much needed season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not necessarily positionally. It's always been comparison with different people in the same position, because there are, like, although we serve in the same position, there are some nuances that because of where I am, because of what God's asking of me, because of what He's revealed through me, like my leadership looks different, our structure may look different. I do know, like, I am a big proponent of good study when it comes to leadership. So in that study, sometimes if you're not careful, that becomes comparison and not study at all. Now I'm not studying, I'm just looking for what I can hijack, right?
Yeah.
I want to be that person, so I'll do those things. And that's carrying someone else's mantle. And you're not, like, there was never a place where David was being asked to be Moses. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Moses had his own challenges, and a sling and a rock are not going to separate a river, right? Neither is a staff, but it was what was in Moses' hand. And probably a staff would probably be better suited for David facing a giant than a sling and a stone. And still, sometimes we get in that place where we're in this comparison mindset. Having people around you that constantly push you back to what God said last is critical, because I don't feel like any of us are called to look the same and work the same. And I can't tell you, even as we navigate our model as a church, there are times where people are like, well, you would be more successful if you did A, B, C, and D. Yeah, but that's not who we are. So being committed to what the Lord says is sometimes challenged by some of that comparison.
Yeah. I even think I told him this yesterday, but we had a guy at North yesterday, Harrison, do the teaching moment and the worship close. He did a great job. And I just said, in all honesty, like with what we're talking about today, my gut impulse, like immediately right away, is to feel threatened when something like that happens. When I see someone who is clearly gifted by the Lord, like, and please hear, that's not where I landed. Like, I was blessed by the worship close that he did in both services. And, but there can be a tension when you're also on the communication team to be like, oh man, there's someone and I don't sound like he does. Just like I don't sound like Pastor John does, or other Pastor John does, or Pastor Emma or Michaela. Like, even in doing this communication thing, it can be tempting to be like, do I need to sound more like them? Which is not the same as, like, we always want to be getting better and developing our gifts. So you also don't want to just stop and be like, no, I got to be true to myself. But to wrestle through, and in that moment, like just in the moment when he was doing great, I recognized it was happening, and I was like, Lord, forgive me. I want to celebrate that you've gifted. There's enough gift to go around. But that was one that I thought of right away. That was like, even yesterday, I'm sitting there and being like, man, he's killing it.
Yeah, I think it's just
I
a
want to
beautiful.
be more like that.
I think it's a beautiful example of color, right? Like we talked about how when you add harmony versus unisons, that harmony adds color. And sometimes if you're just focused in on your note and you don't consider what's happening around you, you can lose sight of the beauty of what's happening. And that comparison monster will come in and rob that right from you.
Yeah. I do have a question about that, because I think seasons can come into play in this a little bit. And when we talk body parts, like a foot's going to be a foot is going to be a foot. But I think sometimes our challenge in comparison can be that we're looking at something and it's not the right season. Like your struggle in missing ministry and wanting to be in full-time ministry when it wasn't the right season. I actually have a very similar experience where I think the Lord actually used jealousy to kind of help me realize that he was calling me into pastoral ministry. Not that it wasn't holy jealousy or anything, but like that was just my, in a season when I wasn't in ministry and saw someone else get a position that I was like, oh, I kind of want that. How do you navigate just knowing that's not my role versus that's not my role right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think, man, it's so challenging because I think this is one of those things that there's not necessarily one solution for. Knowing what the season is an art, man, and just being so. Number one, regardless of the season, be faithful to the season you're in, right? No doubt. But with that said, there are seasons where we are being challenged to change for the next season. So then how do I do that faithfully? Well, again, start with being faithful in the season you're at. And so, I think accountability, well, I say it all the time, relationship. Sometimes we have a bad perspective of ourselves because we're looking for ourselves from the inside out. But bringing people into the conversation, hey, am I ready for this position? Like, I have this thought about what God is asking of me. I really feel like I need that. Like, if I'm better suited for that promotion, or that promotion's coming, or maybe I can be a director of this thing. If you have good friends who you can sit down with, that have a good mind for introspection to help you kind of work through some of that, I think that's good to challenge you to make some changes for the next season. I say it all the time. The more work you can do to prepare for the season that's coming, the better you are when you get to that season. So I think good evaluation is critical, and then allowing the Spirit of God to speak in and through you. Like he'll speak, and he'll place you where he needs and gift you with what's necessary to do the thing he desires.
Yeah.
I always just go back to kind of. I think that's why our relationship with the Lord is so important. When I know him, I know his nature, I know his track record. I can think of someone like David, who God gave him a word of who he was going to be years before he even stepped into that role. And he's in the tension of watching someone else in the very position that he's been called to do, anointed to do. And all that does for me is remind me that God is in control, and what he has for me will be for me. So it does give me a real big piece. And it's not something that I try to get super spiritual about, but I think it's the reality. He made you for a purpose. As long as you're being faithful, to Pastor John's point, as long as you're being faithful and you're doing what you should be doing right now, in his timing, he will open up what's next for you. So it's just finding rest in him, in him and in his nature, knowing, stay faithful to what you're doing now. God will open the door when he sees fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think where it gets a little challenging is when that jealousy produces something ugly in us. Like, so that's where I would just, when you're in a season and you know there needs to be a next season, it's okay to feel a longing for that season. It's not okay to be jealous.
Yeah.
Jealousy implies that you are looking at somebody else and coveting that thing. And so I would just argue you want to be careful there, because it can produce some things in you that are not of the Lord. And that's where it gets a little scary. Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm...
Yeah.
That was summarizing, but it was through that process and releasing it and surrendering to the season that I was in that the Lord actually kind of showed me, you're moving in this direction.
And to kind of echo John's dad, I think the heart of it too is time with the Father. So there was a season in my life where I didn't know what was next. I was serving as an executive pastor, but my giftings in me have always kind of pointed to communication. So preaching, teaching, that was always kind of where I've known, if I was paying attention to my giftings, I've just known that's where I fit and how the Lord has wired me. And so through conversation with mentors my whole life, it's been, how do you put yourself in the best place to be faithful with this gifting? And I walked into a season where all of those opportunities were shut down. I had stepped down from being the district youth director. I no longer was the youth pastor. I now just had executive oversight over a couple pastors. We had a new pastor that moved in, so there was no Sunday morning opportunities. I wasn't preaching at all. And I remember even some leadership in that moment, in kindness, walking into my office and saying, like, we got to figure this out. And me just sternly saying, that's not your job to figure out. If the Lord wants this, he'll open the door for me. And I got really brave at the beginning of it, but within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I was physically shaking. Like, this is what I do. It's a part of my identity. And I heard really sternly from the Lord one day driving, if I take this from you, would you still love me? So I think sometimes in those seasons, we become so hyper fixated on what we do, we forget why we do it and the person who's called us to it. And it's funny because within a matter of months, the Lord had started making things possible that nobody else could make possible, right? A pastor who was solidified in a church in Charlotte, had his plan, had just told his people, I'm not going nowhere, right? Like the Lord shifted his heart. A lead pastor who I was serving underneath and didn't really have a heart for Charlotte flew into the city and his heart broke for Charlotte, and they just happened to be friends, right? And at the right time, the right questions leveraged, and now, I've preached every Sunday since in a matter of weeks, right? Like, so I say that to say, as much as sometimes we get hyper fixated and obsessed about the next season, just know that he has it for you. And if he has it for you, he'll make the way at the right time. I do think the question though is, do you still love him?
Yeah.
And I think that that's an important thing to remember in the middle of seasons where we're questioning.
And even to what you said earlier, that all of this conversation in Romans 12 comes after the command to be a living sacrifice. And we can't play our part well if we're not doing it out of love for the Father and being willing to be sacrificial, to lay our lives down for him. Paul wrote it in the order that he meant it. So we also talked about, as one body, we really love. And the verse is actually Romans 12:9 says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. And then you found this quote from Francis Chan, which cuts, because he said, if I can pull it up, in the church we divide easily because we love shallowly. And when love is shallow, all it takes is something as trivial as a disagreement to divide us. What does shallow love look like, and what does real love look like? Because I think we can even say it and kind of not even recognize. We get so used to shallow love that I don't think we even always recognize that we're swimming in it. But how do you see shallow love versus real love in 2025 context?
It's kind of like that relationship that only exists within the lobby, where it's the shallow, hey, what's up? So good to see you. I'm so glad, man. I love to have you here. High five, and then when service starts, you're gone. After service, you just hope to see you next week, and you guys never go deep. Like you never talk about anything. You might hang out, maybe you do a coffee once. I just think we use the term doing life together with people, and for some of us, we only do Sundays service for an hour and a half together, and then we keep it moving. So I feel like that shallow love is that surface where we're cool. Hey, I think he's a funny guy, but our families aren't connecting. We're not really talking about anything of any real matter. Like I'm not learning to know about him or his background or his stories or his beliefs or his struggles. Like, so until I really tap into all of that, it's easy to say, bro, we're a tight-knit community. Until they say something that strikes a certain chord with me, and I take offense to that. And again, it's because I think I've elevated you up to a place where we've never even worked at, and now I'm starting to feel the tension of, oh yeah, he's not in day for me. I'm kind of over him now. I'm done. I think surface relationships, you could dismiss people really quick with no problem and keep it moving. And I think that grieves the Father because he wants true community and he wants us to really love, which makes work. It requires work, sacrifice.
Yeah, I'm drawn to this passage, right? He says, don't pretend to love each other, really love them, hate what's wrong. So you can't really love if you don't hate what's wrong. So shallow love is okay when things are wrong, right? Like, I'm not going to get involved. That's too messy. It's too sticky. I don't want to have tough conversations. Real love has tough conversations. It's able to look somebody in the face and say, no, that thing's eating you alive, bro. If you don't get that under control, if you don't bring that to the cross. Real love holds on tightly to what is good. Again, celebrates, encourages what's good. That surface level love, doesn't celebrate, doesn't look towards honoring when people actually do well. Real love, he calls it genuine affection. So to do a little study on that phrase communicates a sense of familiar love, not familiar, but familial. Familial, that's it. I can't even say it right. But it's a love that's communicated through family. there's a lot of conversation right now about family of God and the idea of that. You don't pick and choose. Like, my sister's my sister. That doesn't change. Like, so that means that we got to stick it out through tough conversations over Thanksgiving dinner and life choices that I make that they're not happy with, and vice versa. Like, that's family. And real love is that. Not real love is not that, right? Shallow love doesn't delight in honor. Could care less, but real love delights in honor and elevates people. It's a lost art in our culture today. Just being able to love to see people win and love to encourage others to winning. So I think that's a picture. Paul paints a picture of what real deep love looks like. And it's complicated and it's messy and it gets involved and it's tough, because when you love deeply, that means, and I'll flip that quote. So when you love deeply, it's easy to divide. When you love shallowly, it's easy to divide. When you love deeply, it's sticky when it's time for division. Like, when there are moments where you have to, or things come up that try to divide, it gets ugly and messy. And, well, we don't believe that anymore. Yeah, but I was over your house helping you move last month, and when your baby was sick, I spent countless hours at the hospital with you and held your hand when you were in a fetal position because of that doctor's report. But like, now this thing's going to divide us apart. It gets sticky. It gets ugly. Even good reasons for some, someone moves across country. We've had some phenomenal couples that were instrumental at the beginning of the history of this church. At least my time, even at Hope City West. And they moved away because mom got sick. So they went back to their hometown, and they were active volunteers, close to Jess and I. We went and had dinner from time to time, close to a lot of our family. It would have been so much easier if we were just shallow, but because we weren't, it was tough. It was tough when they left for us. It was tough for them. They had a hard time finding a church where they went to, and we were even helping in the process. So it's what I believe Paul points to as real love. Yeah.
I know that we're going to be doing Unity Week 2 coming up, so this isn't our whole conversation of it, but you painted a picture at the end of Revelation, I think Revelation 7:9, this picture of people from every nation, tribe, and tongue worshiping around the throne in heaven. And I know some of that, to your point earlier, like, we just have to hold on to that hope of reality until Jesus comes back, because we still live in a fallen world. But what would be your hope a month from now, 6 months from now, for Hope City Church as we learn what unity looks like? Is there anything that you would want to see change or us grow? Like, what is your hope? And I'm really going to aim this at lead pastor John Hernandez.
I might surprise you with this answer. This message was really confirming to me. I'm excited about what God's doing in the house, man. Like, we use Dr. Dominguez's painting this week. He's an artist in our North Expression. Me and him have had coffee a couple times. I really like him. We get along quite well. We have a lot of the same interests. His family sits across. They're from Africa. They sit across from Suzanne and Ramesh. They're from India. The pulpit is filled with people from all over the place and from different backgrounds, and there's a beautiful diversity. I had a conversation with one of our incredible church members this week, and they were just amazed how God continues to build off of that diversity. Now, hear me, like, I'm not one of those guys. We haven't spent a tremendous time working at diversity. It's just been a beautiful byproduct of being in the part of the city that we're at, focused a little bit on our leadership, and our leadership's diverse. I don't know if that was planned, just by the sovereign hand of God. So my hope is that we would I think more people would celebrate that diversity if they just even knew. So really my hope is that what God is doing in this, part of Charlotte, in our little part of the kingdom of God, more people would hear about. And if they're looking for that, talked to, again, another couple this week, or I heard of a conversation this week from one of our stewards, that he was a conversation with a newer couple, and they were just floored by the diversity in the room. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful picture of what the Lord has. Now, again, I'm a little bit ashamed to even say we haven't really worked at it. It's not anything we've done intentionally. It's just a product, I think, again, a natural product of being a part of our city. So I pray if we can continue to live in that place of unity. I'm not saying that we're completely living in harmony, and there are some tensions that we navigate, specifically as political seasons ramp up, as issues in our city ramp up, and things become a little bit more polarizing within the context of culture. But I think we've done a fairly good job, to the glory of God, navigating that. And I really love what God is doing. So this is one of those messages that I felt like I was preaching to the choir.
I really made him sing.
There you go.
I was preaching to the choir.
There you go.
Yeah, we did a harmony and unison exercise. But well, I already mentioned we're still doing unity this coming week, but where are we headed?
Yeah, so Paul goes into this conversation around convictions and issues that had arose in the church. So there were some dietary issues and some issues about what day to observe as the Sabbath. And these things that Paul is redefining and kind of clearly communicating become an issue of contention within the church. So Paul really does a phenomenal job giving a master class on how to navigate those differences. It's a beautiful picture of sacrifice, surrender, and then that word conviction, which has caused our pastoral team to run up our sermon prep time has almost doubled over the last 2 weeks, just walking through and navigating this idea of conviction. So I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. So we'll be here on Sunday, 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. at West and at North. We hope to see you there.